Hot off the heels of their 2011 release, the critically acclaimed Dead Space 2, Visceral Studios immediately began work on Dead Space 3. This would be the last Dead Space game Visceral would ever work on, but not their last game. This was, however, the beginning of the end for Visceral, and in my opinion, their swan song. Everything that came afterwards was just EA trying to recoup their investment in them. Now, the development and release of Dead Space is mired in controversy. From the infancy of the development phase, they had managed to dodge a cancellation or two from EA due to poor sales of Dead Space 2, which is absolute horseshit. The team even made a shift to a more modern, at the time, gaming experience, which the producers had almost immediately regretted and wanted to return to a more horror-focused game, but by then it was too late. It was an earnest effort, however, to increase sales to keep the series alive, which tragically would not matter in the end. Not to mention the inclusion of microtransactions in the single-player game, which was widely panned. EA was selling resource packs, several guns and outfits for between $1 and $5, as well as the online pass priced at about $9.99 at the time, which was meant for players to buy to access the co-op multiplayer feature, which at release you were likely playing on an Xbox or PlayStation already paying for PS Plus or an Xbox Live subscription, which is kind of a huge ask when people were already shelling out $59.99 for a brand new fucking game. Tragically, however, Dead Space ended up being discounted down to $39.99 within about 3 or so months and stayed there till EA decided to lower the price further. All this to say, there is no reason they needed to pay gate a standard feature of the game. Now, if you played Dead Space 2 prior and had a save file for it, you could instantly unlock a more powerful version of the standard plasma cutter that was available at the start of the game, which is kind of like the vintage engineering suit you can get in Dead Space 2 for having a Dead Space 1 save file. EA also added a bunch of other really neat things. If you had save data from like Mass Effect 3, you could unlock the N7 rig suit, which looked like the N7 armor Commander Shepard wore in Mass Effect 3. My only gripe on the costumes is they could have let me play as Leather Jacket Isaac the whole game. They could have. He's wearing the skin. I would have paid for that. Like, in a heartbeat, I would have paid for that. No questions asked. I would have paid for that. And just as a reminder, EA shut down Visceral on October 17th, 2017. It is largely accepted they did so to put more focus on their live service games, since that's what they focus on. And since February 2023, EA has laid off nearly 1,000 or more employees as part of a restructuring, while they continue to rake in record-breaking profits. Andrew Wilson is the worst thing to ever happen to EA. Now, I'm not going to sit here and sing EA's praises. They were never the best gaming company. They've never been perfect, ever. Never even close to it. But many of their games are well and deeply loved by the general gaming world. Dragon Age, Dead Space, Need for Speed, Burnout. They're funny sports games. People buy those. They buy them every fucking year. Command and Conquer. I still play that to this day. The Sims. fucking It Takes Two, which is like, it's one of their newer games by Haze, the Haze Light Studios. They did A Way Out, which is also excellent. So they're capable of creating and publishing great and absolutely legendary games. But for Andrew Wilson, the product is secondary, and the profit is all that matters. So, when Dead Space 3 did come out, unlike the other two, I was unable to play it day one. But like I said, I wouldn't have to wait long for the price to drop, so I purchased it for $39.99 the day the price dropped. I was working at the mall at the time, walked right over to the store. Hell yeah, price drop, take my money. You know, it was that kind of situation. And while things were different than the previous two entries, I am firm in my belief that Dead Space 3 is just as good as any of the other two. And in this review, I'm going to tell you exactly why I believe Dead Space 3 was always worth our time and love. But at the time, you weren't ready for that conversation. I am, and have always been, a huge fan of this game. Since the first moment I booted it up, I have loved this game to that day. Dead Space 3 was the game that I started my streaming career with, and it eventually led me down this path right here that we are on right now. So Dead Space is an incredibly important game to me. And I have been waiting for a long time to talk about this game. And anyone who knows me outside of these cyberspace walls will tell you I never let anyone besmirch the name of Dead Space 3. I love Dead Space 3. So if you've seen my other videos, you might be expecting to see Diego in this video, which is fair. He's been a part of a fair few number of videos now. Well, I am sad to report he will not be joining us today. This is a deeply personal review for me, and so I gave him the day off on this one. He's home free. He's off on the puppet farms, getting strange from Miss Piggy. You know what I'm saying? So, without further ado, my Dead Space 3 review. So, despite being the weakest game in the trilogy, Dead Space 3 can still be quite the immersive experience. Granted, there's plenty to pull you out of it. The best way to play for the first time, in my opinion, is with the plasma cutter always in your inventory. It doesn't matter which Dead Space game it is, always use the plasma cutter. The game it's generally easy, even on some of the highest difficulty levels. So limiting yourself early on makes for an overtly better experience. The game itself is generally good, but workbenches. Oh my god, the workbenches. Because of how they're designed, they just completely ruin what's otherwise a really excellent experience. I don't want to get too deep into it yet, but collecting resources is a core gameplay loop. And workbenches allow you to just bypass that with your actual real life wallet, which to this day in 2024, what is it, March something or whatever? No, yeah, February? I don't know today's date. Early in 2024, over 10 years since the release, can still take your fucking money. You can still buy the little microtransactions in the game. You can still do it. They still want your money. Over 10 years later. You fucking kidding me? But knowing that, like, if you're just short a couple of crafting materials, you can put a fucking coin in the machine and you bada bing bada boom, you got it. Instead of going out there to find some more, the option to literally pay your way to success is absolutely game breaking. It fucking ruins the experience. The atmosphere of the game mostly depends on where you are. On the ships in the space part of the game, it can be kind of tense. When you explore the CMS Greeley, the Brusilov, or the Terra Nova, you get a real sense of anticipation for what like you're going to be experiencing on these ships. Hell, even the CMS Roanoke, it does this well too. When you do get on board these other ships, things are real quiet, but you know something's coming. It's just a matter of time when. Granted, the Roanoke does this the weakest. The other ships really just sit quiet and wait to throw everything they can at you, which is preferred over the way the enemies are implemented on the Roanoke. And I guess the Terra Nova does it a couple of times too, but every time you encounter a new enemy, it makes you sit through a brief cutscene of the enemy doing a cool thing. And then bada bing bada boom, there's the new enemy. You gotta fight that now. And all it's really missing is a little title card saying the name of the enemy. Not that I would actually advocate for that, please. I guess I'd say please God don't do that, but well, please Motive, don't do that. Get rid of that bit entirely. If you get to Dead Space 3, just, you guys did a great job in the first one. Continue to do great up to the third. I believe in you. Now, planet side, things are a bit different. You spend a lot more time in like larger open areas, generally well lit, with the exception of Chapter 9 and some of the further missions down the way. But we'll get there. So most of the planet side activities, honestly, they're not too great. It's not too great. It's fine, but it's where most of the game takes place. Now, don't get me wrong, there are some really cool set pieces here, but overall it's weak. Going inside of the Nexus Beast is honestly one of the huge highlights of the game if you don't venture too far off the beaten path. It's dark and it's cramped, and it throws some pretty fierce enemies at you that you are forced to fight. It's awesome. For me, it's the equivalent of going back to the Ishimura in Dead Space 2. It's awesome. For the first like year playing the game, that part always made me a little uneasy. So the optional missions honestly bring a lot in terms of atmosphere, and I think this is where the game really makes its mark. I don't think people really talk about this enough, but the planet side optional missions are kind of awesome. You navigate these cramped hallways and you're defending yourselves against necromorphs hopping out of walls and the roof, and you eventually make your way to like a small arena where you fight a wave or two of enemies for like a little small reward, usually consisting of a new weapon part, some crafting resources. But in these small short areas, the game, it starts to feel like Dead Space, and I appreciate that. Now, above all, Chapter 9 for me is like the Dead Space moment. It's the highest point of the game outside of like the Nexus Beast. On your first playthrough, it is one of the best parts of the game. Sneaking around and hiding from the little deaf enemies or the blind enemies, one of the kinds of enemies. Throwing shit to distract them. It's awesome as hell. It's real tense, it's dark, it's cramped, it's atmospheric as hell, dude. Now, just so I'm not missing anything, co-op sucks all the atmosphere out of the game. All of it. Unless it's your first time. If it's your first time for both players, it's probably an awesome experience. But this was not my first time. It was my co-op partner's first time, not mine. So the things I noticed during the co-op is the difficulty is turned up. You get tougher and more enemies. There's also team-based puzzles and co-op actions where you have to like do things together, and some genuinely spooky co-op missions. Playing the game in co-op at my level of playing is fucking hilarious. There are some real unsettling moments in the co-op experience, but it really just kind of sucked all the horror out of the game. Save for a few moments. We'll get there. However, no matter how goofy I thought the game was being, I am pretty confident that my co-op partner was genuinely unsettled by her experience in the game the entire way through, which is awesome, because that means the game is scary. So if you ignore the microtransactions, as I often do, you will feel that Dead Space is very welcoming. Even the new players. While it's not as immersive as the other two in the series, I still find Dead Space 3 to be it's just a lovely experience. It doesn't demand too much of the player. It wants you to experience its world. Dead Space 3 has some really high peaks. It really does. Genuinely, honestly, it has some really great moments that put it in the same space as Dead Space 1 and 2. But it also has valleys deep enough to make it feel like a totally different game. The Awakened DLC is as close to a return to form of Dead Space 3 that we'll ever have. It feels more in line with the way Dead Space 2 felt than the entirety of Dead Space 3. It's dark, it's tight, yet stronger enemies and fewer resources, and it legitimately feels like it wants you to suffer. It's gameplay wise, it's great. Dead Space 3 is a lot of things all at once, but I think the immersive experience it provides is basically just a cozy action horror game at this point. Unless you play the DLC, then it becomes an action horror game again. Ta-da! When I play, I know what to expect, and it's never gonna be too much or never too little. It's just good fun. It's fun. I enjoy Dead Space 3. I do. I really do. Dead Space 3, it does a lot for the lore of the series, but the story of the game, it doesn't do much for me. I found the story to mostly just be meh, and that includes the Awakened DLC. Some of this stuff is cool, yeah, sure, but most of it's just fine. It's serviceable, you know. So in this section, we're gonna separate the story and the lore. And I'll discuss both, but just to get it out of the way, let's talk about the game story first. The story follows Isaac, as usual. No surprise there, Mr. Isaac Clarke, Mr. Fortnite himself. and it follows the events of Dead Space 2. I think it's like a couple years later, maybe like 10 or so. I'm not sure off the top of my head. I didn't write it in the script because I'm a fucking idiot. Let me yawn real quick. There we go. All right, so Isaac and Ellie are living out a mundane life. They got Ellie a new eye. Ellie urges Isaac to get back out there and put an end to the marker and necromorph scourge. And Isaac is basically, I've seen some shit. I lost Nicole and all my friends on the Ishimura. And when I escaped, 2 years went by, and I find out that I'd been kidnapped by EarthGov, and they were using my brain to build more markers. And then I accept my death on Titan, and you force me to live? So just let me live my life. And that's an important part. Don't forget that part. Isaac accepted his death. It is very important to a point I will make soon. And also, oh yeah, that's stuff. And again later. So, Ellie bounced to try to go finish what Isaac had started. And then Isaac is forced to embark on the mission, meets up with Ellie on the marker homeworld, and kills her new boyfriend. Who conveniently just admitted to betraying the whole team. And they also discover that this is not the marker homeworld. And then they destroy a moon-sized necromorph, and then Isaac dies. And yes, I know that there's the post-credits shit where Isaac calls out to Ellie, but I, as the story interpreter, as the person who is interpreting the story, I saw that as just his last words before he died, seeing as how, So in the last scene of Dead Space 3, Isaac, he gets his death. He gets what he's been wanting for so long. And you can see it in his face, the relief, the peace that washes over him as he gazes on Ellie's face one last time. He can finally rest. A potential lifetime of torment is over for Isaac. He will never hear the call of the marker, nor will anyone ever be able to steal his own life from him ever again. He is finally free, and that's how he needs to be. And then the fucking DLC begins. Isaac and Carver wake up in some rubble on Tau Volantis, and they're like, dang, we gotta go. And so they do. They find a ship to escape, but they realize it can only take them back to the Terra Nova. But then they realize if they go to Earth, the Brethren moons will just follow them. But then they double realize that the moons have been slowing them down the whole time, meaning the moons definitely considered at least Isaac an existential threat and always knew where Earth was the whole time. So Isaac and Carver beeline to Earth to find the moons already consuming the planet. And then another moon forces them to crash into it. And the DLC ends. Game over. That's it. That's the DLC story. I personally accept the DLC as a fever dream that Isaac experiences as he dies floating in space. Similar to the Last Transmission DLC from the Callisto Protocol. However, I find that the Callisto DLC adds credence to this theory, since it was something Glenn decided was so important. They had to retread it for their new game. I mean, Callisto is a reflection of the entire Dead Space series, so why wouldn't the Callisto story DLC be a reflection of the last Dead Space DLC. Maybe I was wrong in my Callisto review to say that we shouldn't compare the two games. Maybe it is important to consider what Dead Space was doing to fully understand Callisto. I literally just changed my opinion of the Awakened DLC. Just now you watched it happen, and it's good actually. Anyway, the story DLC, upon reflection, is excellent and is absolutely the best part of Dead Space 3, even if the experience has absolutely no bearing on the plot of the world whatsoever. Now for Carver. Since I played the co-op, I made a point to make sure I got all of Carver's information. Carver's been through it, dude. He has been through so much that I firmly believe that you could easily have made a few games of just Carver, Dead Space, but Carver edition, the red edition of Dead Space. His wife was a marker researcher who was also trying to find the marker homeworld, and they were both stationed at a red marker researcher facility on Uxor. I don't know how to say that word. So Carver had beef with his superior officer, claiming he was spreading the troops too thin. So the officer punished him with a shitty patrol. And while he was out, his wife called him, very frustrated at his actions. They have just cost them their family vacation time. And Carver was also missing his son's bedtime. I get it. I get her frustration. Totally. Totes. So while on the call, Carver discovered that a scanner had been wrecked, and there was a laser targeting the marker dome, which he immediately warned his wife, "Hey, yo, get you and Dylan to safety," just as the missile destroyed the containment field. So Carver was captured by Danik's group and eventually got free, and he went to go find his family because he's, despite his apprehension to it, he loves his family. But when he did find them, they had unfortunately turned to necromorphs, and he was forced to destroy what was left of his family. This caused Carver tremendous amount of emotional distress. And luckily, he had our old pal, Ellie, to lean on for this, and she helped guide him away from the edge. Like a real bro. Thanks to his wife, however, Ellie and crew were able to find what was then considered to be the marker homeworld, and Ellie set off to find it. Immediately following this, Norton and Carver searched for Isaac, and then begin the events of Dead Space 3. Carver never once in his life felt like he was fit to be a dad or even a husband. He didn't feel like he deserved it. He had severe anger issues, and it got so bad at times that there was an incident involving his wife and kid. He didn't know how to be a dad or even a husband, and in his eyes, he was only a soldier, but he still loved Damara, his wife, and Dylan, his son, very deeply, to his very last breath. In the main game, the marker uses his guilt and love for Damara and Dylan to try to make him betray his mission, but it only makes him more stalwart in his cause and finishing what his wife had started. So now, the lore. Dead Space 3 does a lot of heavy lifting, and it really did a lot of work to establish a potential Dead Space universe of stories to be told. So the SCAF had a bunch of top secret test sites across the galaxy where they were testing the markers. that they had found and made. Included in that list was none other than Aegis 7 and Tau Volantis, among many others. The SCAF realized they had fucked up while doing research and purged all of the colonies, all of the research facilities, all of the military outposts. Every single human who worked at these colonies had either died in the purge or died as a result of the purge. Not being able to escape from the now rampant necromorph infestation many of the stations now had. So not only had the sovereign colonies had been purged, but back in Soul Space, the government there also purged any records that even mentioned those research sites. When the unitologists found the information they did on Aegis 7, I'm here to tell you, it's kind of a huge fucking deal. The legwork they put in to find that black state cannot be understated. And the work they put in getting the USG Ishimura hacked with unitologists is also a testament to their dedication. The documents on the Terra Nova mention many other planets that were candidates for marker research, none of which I doubt we will ever see. But there's more going on in the world of Dead Space than just Isaac Clarke, and the implications of these documents, when read with 200 years of hindsight and 2 other mainline games, is absolutely staggering. Humanity does not stand a chance against the marker or the spread of the necromorph scourge in the universe. So long as life exists, the Brethren Moons will hunt it down and find it. They only seek to consume. And as the past civilization on Tau Volantis showed us, it is only a matter of time before the moons come for you. So, while the game's story is clearly the weakest of the 3 games, it brings so much to the table in regards to the building of the world of Dead Space. With Dead Space 3 concluded, Isaac is finally at peace, and potentially Earth is safe for now. But the unitologists, they will soon hear of the events on Tau Volantis, and Earth and its colonies will have hell to pay. They will not let this go easy. They will not let it go. But we may never find out if that's the case. Maybe EA Motive has some plans, and only time will tell. There is nothing more divisive in the Dead Space community than the gameplay of Dead Space 3. And I get it, I do. It took a long time for me to really appreciate the weapon crafting system, and don't get me started on how fluid and fun the new movement system is. Dodge roll, gross. And a fun new co-op multiplayer experience. Ew, gag me with a spoon. Now, don't misunderstand me. I am not about to sit here and let this game get away with everything. The resource gathering system is absolutely egregious, especially since it's also tied with the monetization system. You can get some vastly overpowered weapons pretty early in the game. And also the voiceover DLC for the resource gathering can only be heard by the player deploying the bot. My teammate couldn't hear it. Why? Literally fucking unplayable. Let's start with the real source bot in the game. So it's the worst part of the game. It really is. It's the worst part of the game because It's a part of the main loop. It poisons everything. Everything. I get it. The sovereign colonies didn't have a credit system the same as EarthGov territories. That's cool, but there is no fucking way these people in the colonies did all this work to bring on fucking transducers. Or I don't know, fucking scrap metal or somatic gel and shit. No fucking way. There's no reason, none whatsoever, that there was no real economy put into place. None. Just fucking change the icon of the credits and then balance out the prices and boom, you got yourself a functioning fucking economy. Like keep the crafting material. Crafting material is fine on its own, but let me buy stuff with credits if I want to. I should be able to just buy a gun, buy a health pack. It's the worst part of the game. And then after making it the worst part of the game, they made it so you can bypass the entire fucking grind with real money. Why? Why did you do this? Why? I get buying uniquely skinned weapons and cool looking armors. Yeah, man, totally. I'm on board and I love that shit. But to be able to buy my way out of a core fucking mechanic, come on. Oh, and you can buy a third resource robot. Why? I mean, I bought it. I'm the fucking problem. But why? The voice pack was tight though. I love hearing the little guy talk. Love it. He's sassy. He's British. But why can't my co-op partner hear the little guy talk? It's funny. It would have been great advertising for that pack. But why can't I buy the resources, man? Resource packs? Come on, man. It's part of the main loop. Damn, man. Come on. Okay. We got that out of the way. Great. I love building the most brain dead weapons. Love it. It's so much fun. It really is. I get to start a session and decide the level of violence I am about to inflict on the world. Like maybe a flamethrower that also inflicts acid damage and is a fucking flamethrower on the bottom. It's like I'm bludgeoning anything that gets too fucking close. Or an assault rifle with a line gun on the bottom. You just sweep the legs and then fill them with fucking lead. It's awesome. Or whatever other destructive nightmare my heart could possibly desire. Now, the possibilities do have limits. Let's not get too crazy. But there are a lot of options to choose from. And a multitude of ways that one can make barely functioning weapons to just make the game harder. Or you can play with some of the classic weapons from Dead Space 1 and 2. It's up to you. There's tons of options, and honestly, the vast majority of those options are so much fun. Now, this next one I'm only going to speak briefly on. It's just a single sentence, as there isn't much to say. Dodge roll good. Dodge roll good. Dodge roll good. I never use it. I mean, I do when I'm goofing off, but against, I've never dodged anything in the game using it. Just not because I can't, but because I never think to, because there are two other games that didn't have that feature, but it's still a good feature. Dodge roll good. All right, so co-op. So co-op has been a decent time. I'm not really one to play multiplayer, but I did so for this. And my recommendation is to play with someone you can communicate well with. Do not play with randos. Please, for the love of, do yourself a favor, don't play with randos. Buy the game for somebody. It's cheap. If you're playing on PC, make sure that one of you has the Steam version, and that person should host the game. I do not know why, but I'm giving you a solution that works right here in good old 2024. Anyway, it's fun. It's definitely fun. Do the co-op missions. They are awesome. It is crazy watching Carver go insane. And I played as Isaac, so it made me genuinely uncomfortable not knowing what the fuck was going on. I played this game the first year it released. This is the first time I played the co-op, and it was crazy. Like, the interactions between Isaac and Carver are just like, it contextualizes some of the interactions they have in the single player game, which I greatly appreciated. I really enjoyed the combat. Full stop. I just think it's fun. With having so much at your disposal with the weapons, it's just a raucous good time. Plenty of ways to completely destroy anything in your path, or make every fight feel like it could be your last. It's your choice. If you want to become an overpowered monster, go for it. That you can do that. But if you do so, that's your fault. You chose that, not the game. You made that conscious choice. So if you want to become overpowered and ruin your experience, go for it. Do it. Go on. Go ahead. Put that Seeker rifle on top of that Force gun, so you can like one-shot anything that comes near you with the Seeker and push away anything that might get you close. You did that. You chose that. Something else that I think is really neat are the difficulties in the other game modes. So you get your standard, casual, normal, hard difficulties, and the New Game Plus, which offers far more than just New Game Plus. You got your impossible mode, which offers the hardest level of gameplay, drastically reducing your resources and making the necromorphs far more resilient. Now, my personal favorite, classic mode. It has the default hard mode as a setting, but you can only craft weapons from the previous game. You start with far fewer inventory slots, and they increase as you find new armor. It is honestly the best way to play the game. And the reward for completing it is, the devil horns. They're back. And then there's pure survival. Enemies do not drop any resources at all, and the only way to get ammo or health is to craft it at the bench. And of course there's hardcore mode, which if you die, that's it. It's over. Back to the top. And then retro mode, I don't know what that one is, and frankly, I don't care to find out. Dead Space 3 is no slouch. There is plenty of replayability. There's so many possibilities and so many choices. You can make your experience as hard or as easy as your heart's desire. And the actual gameplay loop of Dead Space 3 it's hugely engaging. It wants you to play with all of the systems and experience it in all of its splendor. I mean, despite the microtransactions, it wants you to play. I don't know what else you really want me to say. The game's really fun. It's just fun. Yeah, the game is more actiony. I will get to it, I promise. But it's fun. It's a fun game. It's a fun guy. Dead Space 3 ain't scary. What? You think I was gonna say anything other than that? Ha! Gotcha, bitch. I have a lot to say. Dead Space 3 ain't scary, and why should it be? Come on, tell me. Why should Dead Space 3 be scary? For what reason, other than the two other games are scary, so this one should be too, should the game be scary? In what reality would Dead Space 3 be scary? I'm gonna take a step back real quick. So, Resident Evil 4 was the basis for the existence of Dead Space, right? And I recognize Resident Evil 4 is not as scary as Resident Evil 2 was. But you know what was less scary than those two things? Leon's campaign in Resident Evil 6. Now, why the hell are we talking about Leon Kennedy's journey in the world of Resident Evil? Well, by his third experience, he was completely unfazed by the horrors around him. Wow, that sounds a lot like Isaac Clarke in Dead Space 3. So if you're playing as Isaac and he's not scared, should you be scared? Fuck no. This is something I've never seen anyone talk about. Well, most people just avoid talking about Dead Space 3. Not me. If there are no fans of Dead Space 3 left alive on this planet, I'm dead. But by this point in Isaac's life, he is done with the bullshit. He was ready to die at the end of Dead Space 2 and was forced to live, and now he makes everyone else's problem. By this point in Isaac's life, he is done with the bullshit. He was ready to die at the end of Dead Space 2 and was forced to live. Now he makes that everyone else's problem, especially the necromorphs. But in all seriousness, Isaac is very confident in his abilities against necromorphs. He's seen so much between the Ishimura incident, the hive mind fight on Aegis 7, the terror of the Titan Station, the exploder babies in the daycare center. I mean, come on. Fighting off the marker and his influence directly during a convergence event. What would the writers and developers have to throw at Isaac to make both you and him scared? I don't know. I don't know what they could have done to make this scary. But, you know, end of the day, I'm glad they didn't. And yes, of course, it sucks that the last game in the trilogy is not as scary as the other ones. Yes, I know it's not scary. But it isn't. And between friends, it was the right call. Now let's not put the cart before the duck. Dead Space 3 can be scary. It has its moments, namely Chapter 9. As I stated above, it really sets in that there are things here that have not seen the light of day for over 200 years. You disturbed them, and now they are very, very hungry. Chapter 9 was the first time I felt like I was on a back foot when playing for the first time. It is great. Following this section, every other optional objective is just really intense. You got your claustrophobic dark hallways and life or death firefights with the worst that the game has to throw at you. Oh, don't get me started on the optional mission where they throw what feels like 20 regenerators at you. Like, what the fuck was that shit? That's fucking scary, for real. So while generally Dead Space 3 isn't really all that scary, it has its moments where it can be as tense as the earlier titles. But overall, it's not really that scary. I did all of the co-op with my friend NarorahVT over on Twitch. All her links can be found below. And this was a new kind of experience for her. She's been playing the Chilla Arts game and a bunch of the Dread XP games, as well as various other games like Cult of the Lamb, stuff like that. Like horror J. She's still horror, just a different kind. It's a different kind of horror. So since she was my co-op partner, I decided to put her aside and ask her about her experience regarding the game, since this was her first experience with a Dead Space title. And so let's roll that bean footage. So did you have any expectations going into Dead Space 3?
I actually have never played any of the Dead Spaces, so I had no expectations going into it. I was surprised to learn that it was an older game because of the way that it played and the graphics. Like it plays a lot like a modern game would, but overall I think that it was a positive experience that I had with it.
You can be as negative as you want.
Well, I didn't love the gun building feature.
Oh yeah, no, that's perfectly valid complaint.
Yeah,
perfectly valid. What was your first impressions when we started playing the game?
My first impression was that it was going to be a very standard, you go through a cutscene and you play through, and then you meet another cutscene. But I appreciated the fact that and I don't know if that skips too far ahead in saying this, and if it does, we can cut it out. But I like that both of us got to see different perspectives,
Mm-hmm.
So we had different experiences throughout, and I caught on halfway through that I was having a different experience than you were, and as a person, you can choose to devolve that information to the person, or you can choose to hide it, which my option was to hide it because I felt like it made it funner,
Yeah.
Granted, you knew.
I knew something was happening, but I didn't know what was happening.
You were aware that I was seeing shit that you weren't seeing because I was freaking out, and you're like, what the fuck are you freaking out about? There's nothing there. And in my brain, yeah, the fuck there is. I see it right now, but I knew that you didn't see it, right? So I loved that aspect of it. I like that coming in as a co-op, we could play the same game and have different experiences.
Yeah.
And it was intended that way. I like that a lot.
Okay, so did you find the game to be an immersive experience? Could you dive into it and feel like you're in the world?
100%. There was points where we were playing, but my brain was don't get scared, bitch. You're stronger than that. There's gonna be a jump scare coming. You're stronger. Especially when you'd stop moving, I'm something's sus. He wants me to go ahead because something sus is happening. And I would still get fucking scared because I don't know the fuck's gonna happen. I'm not prepared for where this I know something's gonna happen.
Yeah.
But I don't know what. So every time it was scary. Even with you being hey, monsters are gonna come out of this vent and above us. I'd be okay, I'm prepared. And when they come out, oh my god, what the fuck? I'd still be scared.
What do you think of the story that's being told?
I love the story. Honestly, as someone that hasn't played all three, I don't know the full story, right? Which would give me way more context. But from starting 3 and going throughout, I can get enough to get invested, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm invested in all the characters. Even the ones that die, where I'm all right, you were a dickhead and you kind of deserve to die. I still I understand why. Right?
Norton's the only character I don't give a shit about. Everyone else is
that's
hell
what
yeah.
I was referring to. I wasn't gonna say it because but yes, he deserved to die.
Absolutely.
And we set him up for that, and I feel good about that. And I didn't know the first 2 stories, but I felt good about his death. I think that speaks volumes on the character building for the series.
Buckle and what's her name, Santos, their deaths were pointless and meaningless, and they hurt. And you get to Norton, and you're just wow, finally a death that I don't mind being a part of.
Literally, you're can you just die already, please? We're aware that you suck, so if you would die, that'd be great. And you kind of feel back, and it's he fucking is a character, and he's important, but also you suck. Like, just die.
So this next question is going to kind of expound on something you've already said. It's a two-part questions. What was it like playing as Carver? I know you don't really have a whole point of reference for playing as Isaac. I'm here to tell you, playing as Isaac is awesome. And were the hallucinations that Carver experienced scary to you?
100%. It's like having schizophrenia, and it's even worse that like the player you're playing with can't see them, because it makes it more realistic. Like if they could like kind of get like a hologram of what you're seeing and make it more like easier to explain. But like when you have someone that sees nothing, when you see everything, it's like, okay, well, I kind of understand the story because I'm coming in a third story, right? So I'm like, I'm still picking up pieces. I'm still piecing together shit.
Well, Carver is a whole
like,
new character. So everything you're learning about Carver, you're learning, everyone who played the game is learning about it at the same time as you.
Well, that makes me feel better because there was points where I'm like, I don't even want to admit that I saw this. So I'm like, is this what I fucking think it is? You know, it's like, it's a very weird skin to be in. There is things that Carver sees that I can tell as they're playing out where I'm like, this is fucked up. Like, this is not sane.
So how was playing the game? And what I mean by that is, how does the game feel when you're playing it?
Eerie. I feel like there isn't a lot of setup for like how the gameplay goes, because you're kind of like going into it like blind. Which isn't bad, because like they do have like the little tutorial that like pops up and is like, hey, this does this and this does that. But I don't think it fully prepares you for like the ambushes that happen.
Fair.
Which isn't a bad thing, because like it allows you to kind of be surprised and like adapt to it.
So you've already answered this next question, but we're gonna get a definitive answer with an addendum. So, did you find the game scary? And obviously you did. So, I would like to know the scariest thing you encountered in the game thus far.
100%. Now this sounds so terrible, but it's not even the big bosses, because the big bosses are so predictable that you knew that they were bosses, and that's not a bad thing. Like, that should be known. Like, you should be able to tell when a game is a boss fight. That's a beautiful thing in itself. My thing was like where like you went through a wave of baddies and you thought that like you got through them, like you felt good. And then like they popped like 3 more out and they were like real strong. And it was like a fuck you for like the developers being like, hey, you fucking thought, but no, bitch, like here they are. Like, I really liked that of the game. Like, it was not predictable.
Hell yeah. Would you consider playing another Dead Space game?
Fuck yes, I would. I would like to play Dead Space 1 to see where it started. I don't like that laugh. That laugh is very maniacal.
I mean, on one hand, I love to hear that, but on the other hand, if you thought this game was scary.
Oh my god, that's terrifying to think about. The third is scary. Like, it's not scary.
The third is considered to be not scary. In the least.
It's like the mild one. That's terrifying.
No, it's not considered mild. It's considered bland.
Oh my god, that's worse. Like, there was points where I literally jumped. I jumped. Like, my body jolted. Like, that's terrifying to even think about. Okay,
so now that we're reaching the end of it, tell my viewers what you do and where they can find you.
I kill babies. I'm on Twitch as a VTuber because my company is super conservative and they fucking suck. I play horror games. I play, as one of my mods like to say it, point and clicks. I also play collabs. I love collaborating. Anyone that wants to collab, hit me up and I will be there 70% of the time. You can count on me.
I'm gonna refute that and say it's much less than 70% of the time.
50%.
At least 50.
50 at most.
That's
all I need. That's all I need.
Dead Space 3, man. We can say a lot of things about it, but only some of those things are true. Is it the worst Dead Space game? Yeah, sure. Sure it is. But it is not a bad game by any stretch. It has its issues, sure, but it is still a good, fun time. The game can be a decently immersive experience if you play alone, helped by your choice and difficulty. Story is fine, just it's a AAA gaming story, nothing really special, not bad, not special. It's not scary, and again, should it really be? The gameplay loop is mostly fine, and the game is just good fun all across the board. Dead Space 3 is not the serious horror experience the other titles are. Dead Space 3 is tired. Isaac is tired. Like Isaac, Dead Space 3 is forced to live. And it decided to make everyone else's problem. And I think that's pretty cool. So now for the question, should you buy Dead Space 3? This one is a bit complicated. The short answer is yeah, please buy this. The long answer is EA are watching the sales of all the Dead Space games very closely since the remake, and all the sales of the old and new games will determine the future of Dead Space. I, however, do not fault you if you do not want to support EA. Fuck EA. Fuck Andrew Wilson. In fact, if you're watching this personally, Andrew Wilson, fuck you, dick. But as an ex-EA employee, I'm here to tell you that there are regular people who work for EA who are just trying to pay their bills. Now, I'm not advocating against acquiring booty on the high seas, if you know what I mean, especially since Visceral are gone. But if you do like it, consider buying it. If you intend to play the multiplayer, the Steam version is $19.99 USD, which I'm gonna be real with you, that price is a fucking joke. The same game on the EA app is $3.99. $3.99. You can also play Dead Space 3 for free if you have the Xbox Game Pass on PC or Xbox. Easy enough. You could be playing it right now, just like that. Physical copies are still cheap and can be found in any marketplace for PS3 or Xbox 360. Now, if you insist on other means, I have this friend. She's a girl and she's very fit. She has a copy for you, no problem. So, if you haven't played Dead Space 3, I recommend trying it one way or another. If you have played Dead Space 3, I recommend giving it another shot. It's better than you remember, I promise. It's better than you remember. Well, hey there. Fancy seeing you here, huh? Thank you very much for watching. While you're here, feel free to hit one of the thumbs down below. Maybe smash that subscribe button. Leave a comment. Tell me how much you personally hate Dead Space 3. And while you're down there, why don't you check out my links? I stream every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday on Twitch at 8:30 p.m. Central Standard Time, and it would be very nice to see you there. It's where the review happens. And if you see something you'd like me to talk about, I can add it to the review. You know, doing so gives me time to ruminate on the idea. You'll get to see an example of that in the next review for Alien Isolation. Very excited for that one. I also have a bunch of other socials down there. Got a Patreon, but I'm pretty sure if you're on YouTube, you know how Patreon works. So I'm not going to get into it. There's also, I have a Discord server. Feel free to join that. I'm pretty active in it. I'm in there every day, posting, mostly to myself, but still, I'm there. And also, please check out Narorah's socials, which can also be found below. She streams too, and honestly, her shit is way more fun than mine. Her and her crew, they cut up. Me, this is me cutting up right now. My streams are very chill, very chill. Hers are fucking hilarious. It's good. It's a good time. Please check it out. Give her a shot. Anyway, that's it. That's the video. Slosh out.